John Keats was an English poet of the second generation of Romantic poets, along with Lord Byron and P.B. Shelley. The poem was composed at Hampstead, London, likely under a plum tree in the garden of his friend Charles Brown. The poet is telling, "My heart aches and drowsy numbness pains my senses, as though of hemlock I had drunk." He says, "My heart pains, and drowsy numbness I am fainting, I am in a half-awakened state." Hello students, I am Anil, Assistant Professor of English, Vidhyaashram First Grade College, the Temple of Excellence, MYSURU. In this session, we are going to look at a poetry titled Ode To A Nightingale by John Keats for the students of BCA second semester. Let us know a little about John Keats. John Keats was an English poet of the second generation of Romantic poets, along with Lord Byron and P.B. Shelley. His poems had been in publication for less than 4 years when he died of tuberculosis at the age of 25. They were indifferently received in his lifetime, but his fame grew rapidly after his death. By the end of the century, he was placed in the canon of English literature, strongly influencing many writers of the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. The Encyclopedia Britannica of 1888 described his Ode to a Nightingale, which we are going to see now, as one of the final masterpieces of John Keats. So John Keats, though he lived for only 25 years, he had created a long-lasting impression in the history of English literature as a Romantic poet. Let us see what is there in this poem. Before we get into the poem, let us look at the context in which this poem is written. Keats wrote this poem during a difficult period. His brother Tom had recently died of tuberculosis, and Keats himself was showing signs of the disease. So he was in great pain before he wrote this poem. He was also under emotional strain from financial worries and a troubled love affair with Fanny Brown. So his life was completely a mess when he wrote this poem. The poem was composed at Hampstead, London, likely under a plum tree in the garden of his friend Charles Brown. Hearing a nightingale's song triggered deep reflections on mortality, beauty, and the desire to escape human suffering. Keats is considered part of the Romantic movement, and this poem reflects themes like nature, mortality, and imagination, which were central to Romanticism. So this is the context of this poem, Ode to a Nightingale. So keeping this entire context in mind, let us go through the poem and see what's there. "My heart aches and a drowsy numbness pains my senses, as though of hemlock I had drunk, or emptied some dull opiate to the drains. 1 minute passed, and leathwards had sunk. It's not through envy of the happy lot, but being too happy in thine happiness, that thou light-winged dread of the trees in some melodious spot of beech and green, and shadows numberless singst of summer in full-throated ease." So here, the poet is telling, "My heart aches and drowsy numbness pains my senses, as though of hemlock I had drunk." He says, "My heart pains, and drowsy numbness I am fainting, I am in a half-awakened state. Like I had drunken some hemlock and emptied some dull opiate to the drains. 1 minute passed, and leathwards had sunk." So Leith is a god of opium. So here, he had cast a spell on me like that. "It is not through envy of thy happy lot." Now he says, "I am not envy of your happiness, Nightingale." He is addressing Nightingale. "But being too happy in thine happiness, that you are light-winged thereat of the trees in some melodious spot of beseeching green and shadows numberless, singest of summer in full-throated ease." That you are singing in full-throated happiness, but it does not motivate me to do anything because I am in a great pain and in a half-awakened state. "Oh, for a draught of vintage that hath been cooled a long age in the deep drilled earth, tasting of flora and the country green, dance and provincial song and sunburnt mirth. Oh, for a baker full of the warm south, full of the true, the blushful hippocrene, with beaded bubbles winking at the brim, and purple-stained mouth, that I might drink and leave the world unseen, and with thee fade away into the forest dim." He says, "I'm feeling as if I'm drinking from a long preserved bottle of wine, tasting of flora and country green, dance and provincial song and sunburned mirth. Oh, for a beaker full of the warm south, now I want to move towards the warmer side of the region, to the south of England, full of the true and blushful hippocrene, with beaded bubbles winking at the brim, the purple stained mouth that I might drink and I leave the world unseen. So, consuming this wine which is intoxicating me, I should forget all these things. That is what is expressed in this stanza. Fade far away, dissolve, and quiet forget what thou among the leaves hast never known. The weariness, the fever, and the feet fret here, where men sit and hear each other groan. Here, the poet is talking about the human sufferings that is prevalent in the world. He talks about fade far away, dissolve, and quiet forget what thou among the leaves hast never known. That you never know what human beings are going through. Here, the weariness, tiredness, fever, and the fret. Here, where men sit and hear each other groan. People are suffering. They are screaming in pain. They listen to that. Where palsy shakes a few sad last grey hairs. Where youth grows pale and spectre thin and dies. Where but to think is to be full of sorrow and leaden-eyed despairs. Where beauty cannot keep her lustrous eyes, or new love pine at them beyond tomorrow. So here he is also talking about how we age. Our enthusiasm fades away as we age. Everything turns grey. And also he says, the beauty cannot keep its beauty forever, just like the love which he has lost. So he has lost his brother. He has died of tuberculosis and his lover is not in his touch. So he says, everything fades away and your song has no influence on these things. Away, away, for I will fly to thee, not charioted by Bacchus and his parts, but on the viewless wings of poesy. Now he says, go away, let me go away. I don't get influenced by these intoxicating things that I am consuming, the opium, wine, etc. So he says, not charioted by Bacchus. Bacchus is the god of wine. So his wine is not influencing me. I don't want to fly with this intoxication, but on the viewless wings of poesy. I'll take poesy or poetry as inspiration. Though the dull brain perplexes and retards, already with thee, tender is the night and happily the queen moon is on her throne, clustered around by all her starry face, but here there is no light. So here, this man, the poet, is talking about all beautiful things, and also he says he cannot see those things in his life right at that point of time. But there is no light. So with all these good things, with poetry I would try to fly. But what happens? Tender is the night. The night is so quiet and beautiful, and happily the queen moon is on her throne. There is a beautiful moon coming out, clustered around by all her starry face. So it is surrounded by glittering stars, but still there is no light. Say what from heaven is with the breeze blown, though wondrous glooms and winding mossy bays. So finally he says, with all these things I cannot find light. I cannot see what flowers are at my feet, nor what soft incense hangs upon the boughs. But in embalmed darkness guess each sweet, wherewith the seasonable month endows, the grass, the thicket, and the fruit tree wild, white hawthorns and the pastoral eglantine, fast fading violets covered up in leaves, and mid-May's eldest child. The coming musk rose full of dewy wine, the murmurs haunt of flies or summer eves. So in this stanza he says, there are very nice things around me, but I am unable to identify them because of the sorrow which I have in my heart. I cannot see what flowers are at my feet, or not what soft incense hangs upon the boughs. But in embalmed darkness, in this darkness state, I guess each sweet wherewith the seasonable month endows. That means this is a pleasant month of the year, but still I am unable to sense them literally, but I am lost. I am trying to find out the good things that are around me. Then fast fading violets covered up in leaves, and mid-May's eldest child, the coming musk rose full of dewy wine, the murmurs haunt of flies on summer eves. So all these good things I am trying to find out. I am trying to come to my senses, but I am not in my senses. Darkling I listen, and for many a time I have been half in love with easeful death, called him soft names and in many mused rhyme, to take into the air of my quiet breath. Now more than ever seems it rich to die, to seize upon the midnight with no pain. While thou art pouring forth thy soul abroad in such an ecstasy, still wouldst thou sing, and I have ears in vain, to thy high requiem become a sod. So here he says, darkling I listen, that means things are going darker and darker. And for many a time I have been half in love with easeful death. Now I think that I should die. I don't want to live in this sorrowful state. Now I called him soft names in many a mused rhyme. Now I am thinking of death. I think death is the only solution. To take into the air my quiet breath. Now more than ever seems it rich to die. I think the most apt thing to do right now is to die. To seize upon the midnight with no pain, while thou art pouring forth thy soul abroad in such an ecstasy. The nightingale. But the nightingale is singing with such joyous tone that John Keats is unable to hear it. And he says to the nightingale, though you are singing with such sweet voice, though you are motivating me in all these sweet voice, but I would die soon. When I die, even if you sing for a longer time, it's a waste because I could not hear once I die. Thou wast not born for death, immortal bird. Now he appreciates Nightingale. He says, you are not born for death, immortal bird. No hungry generations tramp thee down. The voice I hear is passing night was heard in ancient days by emperor and clown. So you were there in the past, you are there in the present. So your voice has not changed. Many generations have heard your voice. In an ancient days by emperor and clown, perhaps the self-same song that found a path through the sad heart of Ruth. When sick for home, she stood in tears amid the alien crown. This is the story of Ruth, a woman who was hurt by her mother-in-law. Now she is standing in the cornfield and she is listening to the sweet voice of a nightingale. And this motivates her. So, John Keats says, the song of the nightingale has remained same for many generations since the story, since decades. So here, the same that oftentimes had charmed magic casements opening on the foam of perilous seas and fairy lands forlorn. So in all the things, in songs, in stories, we hear this beautiful voice of the nightingale, and it has remained the same and has been an inspiration for all the people. Forlorn, the very word is like a bell to toll me back from thee to my soul self. Adieu, the fancy cannot cheat so well as she is famed to do, deceiving elf. Adieu, adieu, thy plenty anthem fades past the near meadows, over the still stream, up the hillside, and now it's buried deep in the next valley glades. Was it a vision or a waking dream? Fled is that music, do I wake or sleep? So in the last stanza he says, forlorn, the very word is like a bell. So now you are gone. That very word is a bell. To toll me back from thee to my soul self. Now I was thinking of you, now I should think of me. Goodbye, the fancy cannot cheat so well, so I cannot keep myself away from the situation that I am in. As she is famed to do, deceiving elf. Adieu, adieu, thy plenty anthem fades past the near meadows, over the still stream, up the hillside, and now it's buried deep in the next valley glades. So your voice keeps becoming distant, and one fine moment, I cannot hear you. Now he comes to his real senses and he says, was it a vision or a waking dream? So was I dreaming or was it a vision? What is it? The voice of the nightingale. Fled is the music. Now the music has stopped. There is no sound around me. Now I am into my real sense. Do I wake or sleep? So now he questions his real self. Now should I wake up or should I sleep? Or should I be mourning what has happened in my life, or should I motivate myself and get up? So that is the question he finally asks in his Ode to a Nightingale. This is one of the most important poetries written by John Keats, and this poem has influenced many poets in the coming generation. The humans' quest for coming out of their sadness, looking out at the inspirations that they get from the nature. And Nightingale has been an inspiration for many generations. He talks about Nightingale's voice, which remained constant, but the people of different generations have taken inspiration and motivation to move forward, leaving behind all their sorrows and worries. So therefore, this poem is an important poem in the history of English literature and Romantic period. Let us summarize it from the poetry. The speaker hears the enchanting song of a nightingale and feels overwhelmed by a desire to escape the hardship of human life. This is the summary. He wishes he could forget the pain, aging, and suffering that afflict humanity and join the bird in its timeless world of beauty and song. At first, he considers using wine to forget his troubles, but then he chooses to escape through the power of poetry and imagination. He reflects on death and feels that dying while listening to the nightingale song would be sweet, painless end. However, the bird is not burdened by the same mortal concerns. It represents a timeless, almost immortal spirit. That is what is explained here. In the end, the speaker's imaginative flight fails, reality returns, and he wonders whether the whole experience was a vision or a dream. So this is a beautiful explanation and summary of the poem Ode to a Nightingale. We shall meet in the next class. Thank you.